good people of Los Angeles and those with Angelino sympathies the world over. MLS is back, still back. Tonight, Josh Gross, Ryan Wallerson, and we welcome our good friend and fellow writer extraordinaire. This man's probably covered the two LA teams more than just about anyone on the planet. Kevin Baxter is here. Well, he's not here. He's in Florida, where Ryan's also. Me and Josh are in Los Angeles. We're all here to talk about what transpired over the weekend and also look ahead to what went down, what will go down with Portland coming up soon. But guys, tell me, how is Florida right now? Kevin, I know you're out doing reporting for the Times with some COVID stuff, but we've heard a little bit from Ryan. How has it been down there? Like, the story of the tournament is really what's going on off the field, right?
Yeah, well, that's kind of settled down. The last, I think, 10 days, there have been no positive COVID-19 tests in the bubble. They've tested they've done over 6,000 tests. Now, that's not 6,000 people, obviously. It's people being tested more than once. So I think everything's stabilized in the bubble. I don't know how Ryan feels, but I'm not really confident just sort of walking around. The place where I'm staying, there's a lot of people not wearing masks. I've not gone inside, but I've been by numerous restaurants where people are just packed in, again, not wearing masks. Things are blowing up here. This is the COVID epicenter. And it's like a lot of people here didn't get the memo. I'm not sure what they're waiting for, but I don't feel safe, I guess is the way to put it. I don't know how Ryan feels, but I haven't felt completely safe here.
Ryan, how has it been? We haven't talked to you since last week. How has it been, being in Orlando or near Orlando, and what you've seen since you've been there?
No, Kevin hit it right on the head for me. Inside the bubble, much progress being made. Obvious, huge amount of testing, no positive tests among the athletes and the front office staff and the groundskeeper, everyone inside the bubble, and that's a good thing. But outside the bubble, we're in Central Florida, which is a place that seems immune to following, or unwilling rather, to follow the social distancing protocols and the health protocols put out by Sense. I went into Walmart to do a quick grocery shopping the other day, and I just did a mental count, and I absolutely saw more people without masks than I saw with, bunched really close together. As Kevin says, the restaurants and, to some degree the bars as well are down here, packed at, capacity like things are normal, which they're not. So it's been a lot of, as I said last week, staying in the house and to make necessary quick runs or to head into the bubble to cover a match. So I'll be low tomorrow, or rather on Thursday I have to cover obviously this final game against Portland. But outside of Thursday, Wednesday, Saturday, I'm staying real because lack of safety is the flavor of the week here. Flavor of the month, however long I'm going to be down here.
I don't know if Ryan has talked. Ryan, have you talked to them?
But at the same time, knowing that and talk to
Ryan, have you talked to them? Have you talked to them about the setup that we have at the games? Because the way the press, the written media, now there are rights holders and social media people that work for the team websites and stuff. They're in the bubble. But those of us who are outside the bubble, and there's not a ton of people here, national media here, but our setup, I don't know if Ryan's talked about it, we're in a table down in the corner. You can't see the other end of the field. Anything happening at the other end of the field is just a rumor to us. And there are no announcements made. It's very quiet. For El Tráfico, it was very bizarre. There was no atmosphere at all. But the other field, other side of the field, you can't really see from there. We have one monitor. It's about 2 minutes behind on a delay. So, it's hard to keep up with the game. No announcements are made. So if there's a yellow card or if there's a VAR replay, even substitutions, there's no announcements made like there is in the EPL games. It's a very strange environment. There's no lights in the media center. So you have to kind of use your cell phone light to see notes and things like that. They start tearing the press box down right after the game. It's very hard to listen to the Zoom interviews because of that. Before the first game, Ryan hadn't gotten there yet when the very first tournament opener took place. And one of the MLS people that led us into our press box, we have to wait at a security entrance. We have to come in as a group. And he led us to the media center area. And he said, remember, guys, this is a TV studio, so stay out of the way. And that was kind of the message. It's a made-for-TV tournament. They allowed us to come in and watch the filming. It's like we're watching the taping of a sitcom. Stay out of the way. Don't ask too many questions, and everything will be fine. But I mean, I don't. Again, you talk about Ryan feeling unsafe out in the community. I'm not sure that I feel totally welcome at the MLS things. I don't feel danger, but it's like we're more than an afterthought. I think the written press, the people that have been covering these teams for 25 years. This is a made-for-TV event, and the TV money is what they want, and they wanted to get this done before the NBA, Major League Baseball, and everyone else comes back.
Kevin, have you been surprised with the fact that the tournament has gone on? I know from the beginning when I was watching, I was like, there's no way this thing, you had the two initial teams dropping out with Dallas and Nashville. Cases were still popping up at different teams. I was under the assumption that there's no way they could pull the thing off. But now we've had, I don't know how many consecutive days without any cases in the bubble, but it seems like it's full speed ahead and they're going to have the whole tournament.
Yeah, I think it's been 10 days, maybe 12 days now since they've had a positive test. I was with you at the very beginning. I said, when there were all these positive tests, that there's no way they're going to finish this, that best case scenario, they open the tournament, they get a couple of games in. Don Garber, the commissioner, hopes that the conversation and the focus moves to the play on the field and people forget about the positive test. Paul Kennedy, the Hall of Fame soccer writer with Soccer America, he even wrote a story where he said, here's the exit strategy for MLS. Here's how they cancel this tournament without losing face. That's where we were 2 weeks ago. Everyone was talking about this is not going to finish. I think they finished now. My thought then was they open the tournament, maybe get through one round, everybody plays one game, and then everybody goes home. But they've really stabilized it. This has worked out as Don Garber said it would. Now, I say all that with one piece of caution. It's the first round, and the group stage ends on Thursday. LAFC plays the final game of the group stage. After that, the teams that didn't advance, they all go home. The reason that's important is because then what happens is the resort where the teams are staying, it's a Disney resort, that's Swan and Dolphin. It's 2 towers with a sort of lobby in the middle. And it's run by Marriott. Marriott has started taking reservations for that resort for John Q. Public and his family. They can come, and Disney is open now, and they can go to that. The point is, so if you're one of the MLS teams in this tower, you're going to move over to that tower. Everyone's going to be consolidated in a bubble, in a quarantine, but in one tower, so that the other half can be open to the public. The reason that's important is now you're going to have people moving all their possessions from one side of the tower to the other. Yes, they'll be in the quarantine, but there's just a lot of movement that's going to be going on this weekend. And I'm curious to see whether that stirs anything up. Everything was going fine. I think it would have been better if they just could have left it alone. But now you're going to have probably half the teams having to move from one tower to the other, move around. People will be using different gyms now, workout rooms that they have there. Different. Each team has its own kind of like communal room where they can go hang out. A lot of those things are going to be upended. And I wonder if that's going to stir up a little bit of the virus again.
Yeah, I think all of us will be eager to see, whether or not there's an uptick in cases within the bubble. I've certainly been kind of blown away that they were able to stabilize it. Obviously, with the caveat being, I know that they're getting the private testing done in a way and efficiently in a way that the rest of Florida residents within that area are not, which is obviously like bad optics and just flat out, just exposing the problems with our healthcare system. But all of that aside, and looking at the sport aspect and whether or not this thing can continue, it is going to be interesting to see whether they move. And I actually didn't know that they were going to be moving and that they were going to have, as you said, just like random public people being able to come and check in. So that's, it'll be interesting to watch. And I know that like for us, all of our normal jobs outside of these like super eerie, press box situations you've described and just the whole experience of being down there, we talk about the sport and we look at the players and we talk about the coaches, and it's I was on the conference call with Bob and Latif and Eddie Segura today, and even that, it's just strange to have all the distance and not have riders on the ground. And we all hope that once the vaccine gets here and we can all get back to doing this, but who knows how long that's going to all be. But for the time being, guys, I do want to talk about what actually transpired on the field. It ended up being 6-2 in LAFC's favor in the LA Derby down there in Florida. Josh and I know we watched it at home. Kevin and Ryan were on site, probably with a handful of other writers there. Ryan, why don't we let you kick it off? In some ways, we know it was sort of a tale of two halves, a lot of wackiness in the first half. But what was your biggest takeaway, apart from Diego Rossi's just mind-blowing performance?
My biggest takeaway from the game was just, again, we talked about after the Houston match, LAFC start. They did not start well. Obviously, own goal in the first 5 minutes, and they gave up a penalty in the first half. Because, towards the end of the first half, it's a 2-1 score they're on the wrong side of. And obviously, for LAFC to give them the 2-2 draw at halftime. But I didn't think that LAFC played especially well in the first half. So I thought that the Galaxy's game plan seemed to hold some semblance of effectiveness against them. They clogged the middle. LAFC hadn't really gone to the wings yet. They were trying to run fairly centrally through the Galaxy's midfield and back line, and they weren't having a lot of success with it. Being able to score in the strange and unusual ways that they did obviously put pressure on LAFC to not let that gap grow too wide. But once again, I'm really just impressed with this team's ability to adjust at halftime, for Bob to recognize, the deficiencies in his own team and recognize what his opposition, and try to, flip that tide inside of the game consistently is really impressive.
Josh, you and I and Ryan, I think the three of us shared a few texts throughout, but I remember you saying, like at the beginning, like, man, this game's wacky. And with the derbies so far, with obviously all of Zlatan's magnificent antics, all of Carlos's incredible goals, the crowds being such a factor, this one was devoid of all of those things. And yet, in a way, at least that first half and the nature of the goals that went in, it was a lot more like MLS-y, a lot more wacky, a lot more slapstick.
Yeah, it certainly was. I think anytime these two teams meet on the field, it's going to be wild one way or another. Whether they're super tight, contested games, something's going to come out as a storyline that is not a typical match. And it shouldn't be, right? This is a derby. It's an important contest for both clubs, for this fan bases, for everybody else. Clearly, none of the trappings that we've come to enjoy in this contest were down in Orlando. And the first half was very strange. I'll go back to what I said last week for LAFC. It really is a weapon of theirs, the depth. And I think we'll talk about that later. But the ability to substitute five, the ability to pull players onto the pitch and take others off, and the two outside backs, the effectiveness on offense. I think you just saw the Galaxy put up a good fight. And they hung as tough as they could. And then just the LAFC way and the LAFC depth completely overran them. And it was wild to watch. At a certain point, I felt like the Galaxy kind of just closed up shop. I think when it was 4-2, certainly in the last two goals, it just was just keep coming, and LAFC wasn't going to stop in terms of their output. So the scoreline is wild, 6-2. That's not something you typically see. I think it was a beleaguered Galaxy team that didn't have the weapons they would have wanted to have. And LAFC's depth in the end was clearly a weapon that paid off in that last half hour, last 40, 45 minutes. So I think of all the derbies we've seen so far between the two clubs, you can sort of cast this one in its own bucket. You can just sort of say this was its own thing. Not really indicative, I think, of the rivalry, but certainly one that LAFC has enjoyed. I know on social media they've really gone after it and tried to play it up. I'm sure the Galaxy would be quick to forget it if they could and just move on once this tournament's over. But nothing typical in these contests.
Yeah, and Kevin, right before, it had to just be a couple minutes, if I remember correctly, before Bradley Wright Phillips sets up his right foot and picks out the corner and gets LAFC in that 3-2 position, Christian Pavon had a chance to put the Galaxy ahead. It was ruled off for offsides. And after that, things just sort of took a turn. And where was that turn for you? And how did you see the game unfold in the second half that we're all talking about? This gulf started to emerge between the two sides on the night.
Well, I think that talk about the depth is right. I mean, LAFC made 5 substitutions. The Galaxy didn't make their first until somewhere after the first hour, but they made their last 2 in the last couple of minutes of the game. So they essentially made 1 substitution at a time when it could have impacted the game. And Bob Bradley was emptying his bench by that time. The Galaxy just ran out of gas. But when you talk about, everyone mentions that this was a derby game, but it really wasn't. I mean, there was no atmosphere at all there. I think Ryan will attest to that. No noise, no crowd. The players are trying to get themselves fired up. It was difficult to do. But you look at the other, the first 6 derby games, there were 32 goals scored in those games, 16 by each team, 9 from Zlatan, 9 from Vela. So what do we have? We have no Vela, we have no Zlatan, we have no atmosphere. And now we get 8 goals in this game, 6 from LAFC. But the guy that was, you've already mentioned him, Diego Rossi, he did what Vela and Ibrahimovic had never done in a derby game, or in an MLS game for that matter, 4 goals plus an assist. I think this tournament is going to be Diego Rossi's tournament. And the reason I say that is he's expressed to me some frustration over what's going on with his profile in Europe. He wants to go to Europe. He told me he hasn't had the offers that he wants yet. He's still trying to make his name there. Whenever he's played before, Vela has always cast this huge shadow. So even if Rossi scores 2 goals and has an assist, Vela does something in that game that people go away talking about him and not talking about Rossi. And I think when Diego Rossi got on the charter flight out here and there was no Carlos Vela on that plane, I think he felt like, this is my opportunity to shine. This is my opportunity to show everybody what I can do. And I expect that to continue. I think this is going to be his tournament. This is what he wants. He wants to impress people in Europe. There's no other games going on right now for people to be watching. So I think this might just be the start. Watch for Diego Rossi to continue to have a super inspired tournament.
Yeah, and I think he's now at the point, a couple of years into his time with LAFC, coming from Peñarol, where he hadn't had a ton of senior minutes or senior goals quite yet, similar to a Brian Rodriguez situation, where he's now matured as a player, where you feel like he can be aggressive and productive. He is almost the finished product for a European team, and I think he's wanting to put that on. The showcase is coming at the right time, I guess you could say, for Diego Rossi. And I think all of us will be interested to see how he continues to perform in this tournament. Let's not forget, in that first game against Houston, he had one of the best goals I had seen in the tournament up until that point. And certainly the way he took confidently all the goals in this one were great. But obviously Mohamed El Munier comes in. The depth, as we've already talked about, Munier's goal was just stunning. You had also Pancho Ginella come on. You had Sifu play a great ball through to, I believe it was Brian Rodriguez, who then assisted Diego Rossi on one of those. So yeah, the depth, and Josh talked about it last time. We've all sort of circled around it. One thing I think we want to know, Kevin, as between me, Josh, and Ryan, who don't know as much about the Galaxy, do they just, in terms of their bench and their supporting cast, I know Sasha Kleshkin came over this year, do they just lack some of the type of difference-making players? Is it more of a systemic issue with the system that GBS is playing, that he can't plug people in the same way that Bob Bradley might be able to? Why do you think that the Galaxy haven't been able to have that kind of the depth that LAFC has?
Well, they certainly don't have the depth, but they do have at least one, I think, game-changing player. Efrain Alvarez can come off the bench and do some things that we've seen before. He's not a 90-minute player. He may not even be a 60-minute player, but he is a guy that can come on and provide a change of pace off the bench. With Chicharito out now, that really hurts their depth even further. They do have some options, maybe not great ones, but would you rather have maybe a guy who's a little bit lesser player come off the bench and replace a guy who's completely gassed in the 60th minute? When I was driving home from that game about 1:15 in the morning, it was still 80 degrees. So during the game, it was much hotter and it was humid. The Galaxy players all said that they were gassed after the game, and that they were gassed in the game, and that the fatigue was a problem. I think one of the problems with Guillermo Barros-Schelotto, the Galaxy coach, is he comes out of the locker room at the start of a game and he has a game plan, and here's how we're going to play. And he doesn't have the ability to adjust. If a team is giving them a look they didn't expect or playing a style they didn't expect, there is no adjustment that comes from the bench. And ESPN has shown GBS on the bench with this deer in the headlights look, like I don't know what's going on in both of the games at this tournament. He hasn't used his substitutions. He used only 2 substitutions in the first game. He was the only coach in the tournament so far to use just 2 substitutes. In the second game, he made all his substitutions after the game was decided. It was already 4-2 before he started to bring people on. I just don't think that he is reacting to the game. This was an embarrassment for the Galaxy, clearly. The team now is off to the worst start in their 25-year history. They have 1 point after 4 games. I think he's on the hot seat, and I think if the team does not perform really well and bounce back and show some promise against Houston on Thursday, I think his job could be in jeopardy, because they're going to have a month-long break after that before they can even hope to play a game. And if you're going to make a coaching change, I think you do it with some time to make those adjustments. I would not be surprised if Guillermo's coaching for his career on Thursday.
Yeah, and we know that the Galaxy can still qualify to make it into the next round, barring what happens in the other groups and how score lines pan out. I believe is it a total of 4 out of 6 of the third place teams go through?
Yeah,
is that
4 of 6.
Yeah,
that's
4
correct.
of 6 of the third place team. So it's not as if they have to pack it all in and go home, but I think, depending on how other results pan out, regardless of what happens, they might still be on a plane back this time next week. But guys, there's been a lot of news here in Los Angeles in the meantime, and I thought it'd be cool to just sort of, especially get Kevin's take on the NWSL team that's now confirmed. It's tentatively being called Angel City FC. I'm not even going to list the amount of owners. There's a ton of ex-players. There's several different business people. There's media folks, actresses, and it's just this star-studded ownership group. And as we know right now, we don't know where this team's going to play. Are they going to play down at Dignity Health Sports Park? Are they going to play at LAFC's Bank of California Stadium, some other venue? And I just wanted to get everyone's take, but Kevin, we'll start again with you, because I know you've been following this story for a long time, and you're often one of the first to report the happening. So first of all, you must have known this was on the way, but what do we make of it? Where is this team going to be playing? Are the Galaxy or LAFC going to be involved? What do you sort of predict happening by the time they step on the field in 2022?
Well, they would seem to be the natural partners, certainly. The ownership group says they will make an announcement on the name and the venue by the end of the year. They said they're talking to different venue partners. They use the plural. The Galaxy has gone on the record as saying that they are in discussions with the ownership group. LAFC has not said that they are. I personally believe that they are talking to LAFC as well for advice, for nothing else. Dignity Health Sports Park makes sense because there is plenty of locker room space. There is training field space. Everything is in one place. Remember, the Los Angeles Soul, the last first division women's professional team in LA, they folded after the 2009 season, but they played at Dignity Health Sports Park. LAFC, to me, seems to be the natural partner. It's a bit more of a progressive ownership group. They're downtown. It's new and exciting. Playing their games at Bank of California Stadium. I don't think they're going to sell out 22,000 seats every game, but it's a more intimate atmosphere than Dignity Health Sports Park, which is a little bit of a cookie cutter stadium at this point. So there's a lot of things that make LAFC the compelling choice, but there's no training space. There's no room at the Performance Center. There's no space at Cal State LA to expand. So they would have to have a different venue. Another place I've heard rumored is that Santa Monica City College may be an option. That could be a place that could offer training fields and could offer a stadium and everything else. We'll see where that goes. But I think I mean, this is definitely a well thought out. It happened quickly. They started the ownership group, the principal owners started talking about this just 11 months ago after the Women's World Cup. But they have over 30 owners, a lot of Hollywood heavyweights involved. Natalie Portman was the one that actually got the ball rolling. People think she might have been sort of just brought on because she's a headliner. No, there are other people that are involved that may not have a prominent role, but she was the one that actually kind of got this thing started. And she said that she was very enthusiastic about the Women's World Cup, and her two sons who play soccer, they love the Women's World Cup too. And all their little friends were over, and they're like 10-year-old boys, and they're watching the World Cup. And she said she noticed that they didn't care that it was Women's World Cup, that they wanted Rapinoe jerseys, they wanted Alex Morgan jerseys. And Natalie Portman said, I realized that unlike our generations, they didn't look at it as men and women. They didn't look at the sport as being different. They just saw tremendous athletes playing a game that they loved, and they loved watching it. And she said, I think there's been a cultural shift. And she said, we don't have a women's team in LA. We have 11 professional sports here. It's a crowded landscape, but we need to have a women's team here. And so she got some of the other people in the ownership group together, and she said, let's go check out what's going on in soccer in LA. And so the first game that they attended together, first MLS game, was the Derby game last year, LAFC and the Galaxy at Bank of California Stadium. And you guys were all at that game. You remember the atmosphere. If you want to try to sell someone on the idea of starting a soccer team, that might be the game you take them to say, this is what's possible if you do the thing right.
Yeah, and I mean, it'll be interesting to see how things come together and unfold. I know a lot of people in the LAFC community, Mark Rojas and Lindsay Rojas among the two, who were really pushing it with signs and banners every game to bring NWSL to LA. You know, there's been a lot of activity on the ground that would show that there'd be support there. From what I understand, you know, it's an unconditional support regardless of where this team goes, even if they do play at your rival stadium in Dignity Health Sports Park. You know, these are supporters in a community that could still follow them and sort of unite these two fan bases, which would be kind of an interesting thing on a smaller scale at these games at first. Who knows? Could grow into something major. So it'll be interesting to have, and I think I can speak for all of us. We're really glad to see it come together. Josh or Ryan, is there anything you guys wanted to add about that? Maybe Josh, you know, how much do you see this succeeding?
No, I see a lot of potential for it. I remember last season when the U.S. women's national team came to Banc of California as they were preparing for the World Cup. A lot of the conversation amongst the current team, and of course there was a lot of celebration about the 99ers, and everybody was getting questions about when's NWSL coming to Los Angeles? When's it happen? Mia Hamm, when are you going to bring it? When's it, obvious connection to LAFC and all these sorts of things. So it makes a lot of sense. I think there's a lot of room. Southern California is a big soccer market, and it certainly feels like Los Angeles should be represented in that league, which is now on CBS Sports Network and CBS and getting a little bit more shine. It makes sense. I think the point that was made about young kids not really caring anymore, man or woman, they're invested in it. That seems to ring true. And, I remember Natalie Portman at that women's game. I mean, she was there cheering, and a whole bunch of people were cheering and enjoying themselves. And so I think the success of the women's national team certainly translates to a professional women's soccer league in this country. There's no reason it couldn't happen. I kind of like the idea that neither LAFC or the Galaxy would be official partners, where it's sort of a community of soccer if it works out that way.
Maybe they can play half of the home games in Carson and half of them in downtown LA. Who knows? There may be solutions in here.
Yeah, hey, there's always the Rose Bowl, right? So you can put them wherever you want. I think people will show up. I know Kevin Baxter will be covering the games, and
you bet.
The better that is.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's exciting time for soccer in the city of Los Angeles for sure, and it's definitely, it was a good news. It was buoyant news given COVID and how weird sometimes it's been to watch these games on TV and not see the crowds, and knowing what the crowds bring, especially to the Derby game. It was definitely pleasant news to see that come together, and I think we can all expect whatever happens, it'll be an exciting story to cover and to watch. Kevin, I know you've got plenty of other things on your plate, and before I let you go, I wanted to see real quick if you had a sense, having watched the Galaxy play Portland and watched Portland now play Houston, What can LAFC expect in the game with Portland, and what do you see unfolding in that one?
I think Portland has played really well in this tournament. Surprising. There's been a number of surprises, and some of the LAFC fitness staff told me, the performance staff told me that it looked for a surprise in this tournament, and because not everyone's on the same fitness level, so the teams that dominate normally aren't going to dominate here. And we've seen that San Jose, has played really well. That was a surprise, and so Portland has kind of stepped it up a little bit. I like LAFC in this game, but I think it's going to be much closer, obviously, than the Galaxy game. I think it's going to come down to LAFC's fitness and depth in the second half, so I think it could be decided late. But the important thing, I think, for LAFC is that once they get through this, Bob Bradley said that he came to this tournament with the 3 group play games. That was the focus. Get those points to take back home for the regular season standings. And then if we get into the group stage, then we'll reorganize and go on from there. In a sense, getting out of the group stage into the knockout stage, that's gravy. And I really think it's going to be fun to watch LAFC in the knockout stage, because essentially they're going to be playing with house money. Once they get out of the group stage, if they win this game and they get 7 points, 7 out of 9, that's going to be a huge success. And whatever happens after that, it doesn't really affect the regular season, and it's just going to be, let's go out and have some fun. These guys are going to be playing like they were kids, on the sandlot. So once they get past Portland, that's the serious game, and then I think it becomes fun. Certainly they want to win, but the pressure's off at that point. It's just fun. And I think it's going to be really exciting soccer once they get to the elimination stages.
Well, I know it's a game we're all excited for. It's coming up on Thursday night, 7:30 here. Kevin, man, your reporting is always a treat to read about both of these teams, about soccer in this city. Now you're doing COVID reporting. Subscribe to the LA Times, people. Help this guy keep going and keep doing good work. Thank you so much for your time. You've been graceful.
Thanks, everybody.
Stay safe down there. Good to have you on. Miss hanging out with you, my friend, and we'll talk soon.
See you Thursday, Ryan.
And we are continuing on. Josh Gross, Ryan Wallerson, and myself, Alex Dwyer. Guys, today Bob dropped the hammer. Dio went back home to Los Angeles. He is out for the rest of the tournament. It sounds like this problem with his foot continues to bother him. They want to get some more tests to find out what's going on there. We also know that Andy Nahar may be available for this one. Bob didn't say he was match fit yet. It's around 20, 30 minutes possible in this game against Portland. We also know that Pablo Cisniega had a great match in goal for LAFC against the Galaxy, and he and Vermeer are keeping it close as to which player is going to get the nod. I thought Vince LaRosa, which at That's How You Soccer at Instagram, always great analysis from these ones, especially right away after the games are over. He talks about maybe Vermeer's weakness being guessing, like he's a keeper that likes to guess a little too much, where Cisniega might be the one, still at that younger age where he's going to commit and try to make every play he can and not try to read it with his eyes. But between these moving pieces, as Kevin said, the third game in the group, the last one that starts to, counts towards regular season standings. Ryan, let's start with you. How do you see LAFC coming out towards this game? And do you think any of the, jubilation from, bludgeoning the Galaxy 6-2 will prevent them from coming at Portland with the best team that they have?
Well, you'll remember that I said coming into the Galaxy game that they were kind of safe from letting the gas pedal off because they hadn't played their best game or gotten the result that they wanted against Houston. Obviously, that emphatic final score against the Galaxy, but I think that Bob Bradley is going to have his team focused group stage games that count for points in the league. They're important to the team, and they're in a position where they can win their group with a result on Thursday. So go out there and try to kill those two birds with that one stone, win the group, set yourself up for the knockout stage, but also be able to secure 7 points, the lead. That's in the long term for them to come out anything more than with their at full throttle, with their full intent. maintain the get off to a better start to these games, because the offense has been able to pull the defense out of holes twice now, but they're facing habitually played them very tough on defense, and that's given up 2 goals in this tournament through 2 games. And both of those goals came at stages in where it was more or less already decided in their favor. They had 2-0 leads in both of those matches and gave up, second half goals to their opposition twice. So when just to keep out of goal, you don't get 3 and 6 goals against them too often. So I think that LAFC is going to have to, I'll say, out and really control those early stages of the game. They don't want to be trying to play catch up against Portland. They want to be trying to control the match, especially the front line. Same thing that we said in the last pod. You don't touch it because they're doing great jobs in creation and finishing, but to kind of get a feel for the game and get their footprints, fingerprints, however you want to say it, on the game earlier, instead of having to come after have adjustments to improve their play in the second. I think you'd love to see 70 to 90 minutes of LAFC just entire field going through, but also using the wings and going at Portland, with all they've got to try to score. Is a group effort on the squad. So the squad has to put forth a more, if not representatives, certainly put on the defensive side of the ball in this tournament so far if they want to get these 3 points against Portland.
Yeah, and I think the biggest message Ryan is getting through here is really that control early, the fact that Portland's not going to be a team that's going to leak a lot of goals. LAFC in the first 2 games gave up a goal in each game in the first 10 minutes. The first game was in the 9th, I believe, and the second one was in the 5th minute. Of course, they were able to come back in both times and look the team to win. In Galaxy's case, they did win, and Dynamo's they probably could have or should have in the performances in the second half. Again, back to that depth that they have. But it's not a game you want to play with Portland, I think, to risk going down 2 goals and having to fight back in the same way. Josh, what do you expect from this Portland team? LAFC and Portland have had plenty of feisty encounters already in their short couple years of playing each other.
Tight competitive match. No question about it. Philosophies are different. I think that LAFC's pressure on Portland has always given Portland some issues. They're a great defensive team, and they've got tons of skill. So far, I think the first 2 matches they haven't played under pressure. They've dictated the games, dictated the pace of the matches, controlled them, generally speaking. I think LAFC is going to want to get on the front foot and have a good start in that first 15 minutes. Again, from the outset, from the first show we did, kind of like coming into this tournament, the question of how sharp can a team like LAFC, considering how intricate they'd like to be, considering the sharpness is always something that Bob Bradley harps on is a must for their success. It feels like they get sharper later in games, in part because the teams that are playing are fatigued, but also I think because they're starting to, get the cohesiveness, starting to get their form. Third match of this tournament, I think they'll be as sharp as they've been yet. This is clearly the toughest match of the 3, and my guess would be a tight, competitive match. Really, maybe dependent on what happens, because Houston, if they're ousted, say the Galaxy get a point or win that game, Houston has no shot of advancing, right? So that may dictate some of what this contest look like, because there's a conceivable way of LAFC not advancing. Am I wrong on that, or is that still in the cards?
Yeah, they're not guaranteed to advance at this stage, I believe. I think it will also have to do with what happens in the other groups, not just in LAFC's group.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know all the permutations. I think when I visited the MLS website earlier, there was like 16 different permutations.
Highly likely that they'll advance, but I think the results of that match may factor in somewhat. Sure. I think Bob is going to want to get. He's played so much depth, and like every match has played 5, and he's continued to rely on the people coming off the bench. And you mentioned Dio now going home, and it hasn't. No Vela, no Dio. They haven't missed the beat. I mean, Rossi's been incredible. I would expect his form to continue. It feels like Bradley Wright Phillips has fit right in. Edward Atuesta has been great. Latif, I think, has not found his form. Once he sort of really gets going, just another level. The effort's there, but I think this will be the best match of the group stage for LAFC, just in terms of competition and how well they'll play. Even though they got 6 on the Galaxy, I think if they manage to get 2 or 3 against Portland, that says a lot. And I think a draw or a 1-goal win for LAFC seems likely based on what we've seen. And then they leave this group the group stage winner and sets them up for that knockout round.
Yeah, you wonder if LAFC can manage to keep Portland off the score sheet in the first half. They haven't conceded yet in this tournament. I know it's only been 2 games in the second half. LAFC has just come with so much gusto. I don't know if it's the combination of, as Kevin said, the weak legs and the tiredness. Maybe LAFC's a more fit team than some of these other teams. The tactical changes Bob is making, the discussions he's having with players, and then obviously the thing we've reiterated over and over again is the depth. I mean, just knowing who they have available, the fact that you can bring in 5 subs, they were able to put Latif back at right back in this one, and swap out Dayon, who conceded that penalty, and slide in El Munier in a more attacking role. I mean, so many. We saw Bob do this, right? And John Thorrington, when they built this team, they wanted players who could be effective in different ways, dynamic players at different positions. And it's like the most terrifying thing to be an opposing coach, knowing that they have 5 players they can bring off the bench that could all do huge, significant, game-changing things in the course of a match. And so you really, I think if you're Portland, you want to try to get at LAFC early when you're maybe still catching them in that preseason mode. But Ryan, did you expect to see anything different in this third match on LAFC's side than we've seen thus far? We know Bob always wants to say that they're consistently playing the same style, the same philosophy, and other teams have to adjust to them. But anything about this contest make you feel like we might see some different names on the starting sheet?
We've kind of Bob in his press conference today gave us a couple of clues, right? We know that Andy Nahar is not going to start. Bob called him a 20 to 30 minute man as of this point in his training. We know Dio is no longer in the bubble. So Bradley Wright Phillips will stay at central forward position. I guess the midfield would be the most interesting spot to look at for me in terms of the potential substitution, if for no other reason than that the substitutions that have been made in the first 2 games have done so well. I think that Cifuentes definitely represents, and Janela's come in twice now in the first 2 games and been a positive substitution, positive ideas, forward play on the ball. Between that and how they're doing in practice, which we're obviously not privy to, maybe that's enough to force his way into the starting 11. But then I think the spot that we know there's going to be, someone who's going to play for the second time at a somewhat inconsistent clip is at that goalkeeper position, because we've seen Cisniega, and those are the 2 LAFC goalkeepers that are going to be featured in this tournament. So I'm curious to see that start is kind of a statement from Bob that will be the goalkeeper that they're going with moving forward. Because one thing I don't think LAFC want to do is to continue to flip-flop between the 2 should they advance to the knockout stage. I don't think that's the way to try to win this tournament, going back between them. I believe that whichever goalkeeper you think has the better chance of helping you, lift that trophy at the end of this should be given the opportunity to get his starts, make his about the differing playing styles between the 2 already. Vermeer, the veteran, being a guy that's a little bit more willing to guess than Cisniega, a little bit more by the book, given where he is in his career. Neither goalkeeper did great in their first games, but these are preseason games for LAFC, so you understand that the more playing time either of them gets, you hope that they would trend upward. So I would say that's the most positional battle still existing for LAFC coming into this third group stage match. I'm really curious to see who establishes themselves as the number one goalkeeper.
Yeah, and we know Zach Abdul, as Bob said in the press conference today, he's enjoying keeping both of these keepers really going toe-to-toe and keeping that competition high. I think it's really the difference between something like last year's you're going with a really experienced keeper and a keeper who's still on the ascendancy, probably a keeper that LAFC hope to have for a long time in Cisniega and really grow into the number one for years to come. And so I think I've actually enjoyed watching the two of them go at it. And I think while I agree in the long term, you don't want to, have it flipping back and forth, something we did see with Tyler Miller and Cisniega last year. I do think, as Kevin brought up, which is, I think, important to remember, this being the last game that counts towards the standings, as long as LAFC make it through, it's sort of like, well, whatever, just go for it. Go bananas, try to win the tournament, get Christian Torres, the academy kid, on there at some point. I think we're all looking forward to what the knockout rounds will look like. But, of course, LAFC have this one to go after first. It's a 7:30 p.m. Pacific time kickoff. Ryan and Kevin Baxter will have to be there at 10:30 p.m. on the East Coast in that hot Florida, silent, weird, post-apocalyptic press conditions, and enjoying it on our behalf without the giant Adidas logo in the middle and the fake crowd noises piped in. I certainly enjoyed listening to the ESPN feed the other night without the fake crowd noises. That was a treat compared to when we have them. But again, that one's at 7:30. Guys, is there anything else we want to add to this? I see that LAFC has scored 9 goals in this tournament, which is 3 more than any other team. I know someone predicted 1-0. I don't see how they're not going to score more than 2 goals. It might be another 4-2, 4-3. Who knows how this thing's going to go? It might be tight, but I see goals going in. And so it's going to be one worth watching, as they usually are, involving the black and gold. Anything else, gents? Josh Gross?
No, I will corroborate. Oh,
go ahead, Ryan.
I said, just let me corroborate Kevin's accounts of the press conference conditions real quick. A dark corner of field 17 with the tables turned over, all of the outlets out. Every process happens faster than I can submit my stories. After the Alex game, the last groundskeeper pointed me out and said, "Hey, this is the hardest working guy in the field because he's going to close us all out, and that's probably going to happen." MLS is back, and we're here for it. So more to come from Thursday.
Thank you guys for watching, listening on a podcast platform near you. Again, thanks to Kevin Baxter for being on. He covers the team for the LA Times. Josh Gross is here. Ryan Wallerson's here. Alex Dwyer. We are the Season Pass Podcast. Next stop, Portland Timbers, 7:30 on Saturday. Thursday. 7:30 on Thursday. Take care, y'all.